Hey guys, Harrison back at it once again for a brand new video for you, and welcome to episode 13 of the Online Racer, Formula 1 2013 online gameplay, as well as real-world topics from the world of Formula 1 worth talking about. Now, I need to do a little bit of a backstory here as to what set me off last night on Twitter. It goes towards a certain Lewis Hamilton. So if you're a fan of Lewis Hamilton and you're watching this, be warned, your boy comes under a bit of scrutiny in this video. All I can say is, I highly recommend you listen to the entire video and you put your rose-tinted spectacles to one side before you comment on this. Because if you don't, you're probably going to hate me for this. But just bear with me on this one and hear me out, okay? Cool. Right. Last night on Twitter, I saw a friend of mine, friend of the show, Tom97 Fine Strat, you might know him as Tom97HD on YouTube, retweeted a tweet from a certain Alex Gillen regarding snooker. It was actually, the Masters are going on right now at the Ali Pally in London, and Ronnie O'Sullivan right now is kicking some ass right now. Beat, I think it was, it was Ricky Walden. He beat him in the quarters 6-0. Then he beat Maguire 6-2. He's in the final against Mark Selby tonight. But basically, he made quite the comparison with this tweet. And he said, and I quote, "This is truly enjoyable to watch. Vettel isn't enjoyable because it's about the car. If Ronnie had a superior Q, it would be shit." And I was like, okay, anyone that knows Gillen well or follows him on Twitter knows it's quite obvious he's a Hamilton fanboy. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. Anyone that's followed him or knows him well on Twitter knows he is a big time Hamilton fanboy. So, and he's always seemed to nitpick and criticise Sebastian Vettel's success. Now, don't get me wrong, he's perfectly entitled to do that, that's his opinion. But I think him comparing a guy like Ronnie O'Sullivan, a snooker player, to a Formula 1 driver that's going through 5Gs through the corners and driving a car at 200 miles an hour needs a totally different set of skills. So I think making that comparison is stupid, quite frankly, because you need a different set of skills to be successful at snooker compared to being successful at Formula 1. And saying, oh, if Ronnie's Q is superior, it would be shit. That's not how snooker works. Surely the Q is only as good as the person who's using it, no? He's one of those guys that wants to, be one of those typical guys that can't stand Vettel because of the car he's driving, when it's not quite as simple as that. And I've said that before in previous videos, but it got me thinking about Lewis Hamilton. And I said on Twitter that I think Gillen was quite bitter that Hamilton basically has not been the dominant champ we all thought he was going to be. It's one of those things that if Lewis Hamilton was in Sebastian Vettel's position, coming off 4 straight titles, winning from the front quite often, which is what the Red Bull has allowed him to do, plus the luxury of being an excellent qualifier, one of the best ever. Would people be complaining about Lewis Hamilton's position? I don't think they would be. And I think that's a lot of that is down to the media. I think a lot of that is down to Formula 1 fans in general. But it's one of those things where I don't think Lewis Hamilton is as good as people like to make out he is. Uh-oh, I can just see the lightning bolts gathering over my head as I talk right now. But it's something I said. It's something I said last night. I said this, and I quote: "You can tell Gillen's still bitter about Lewis Hamilton never being the dominant champ many hoped he would. Welp. Then again, I can count to 4. I love Lewis's speed, it's unmatched, but he's not adapted his style. It's not 2008, he can't push like hell 100% of the time anymore, in my opinion. That's what's held him back." And I'm inclined to agree with this. Obviously because it's my post. But the thing is, I want to like Lewis Hamilton. Like, people have always said, Dre, like, what's your beef with Hamilton? And, why don't you like Lewis Hamilton that much? And I'm going to address this once and for all in this commentary, so stand back and pay attention, okay? You might miss something. A lot of people do when they listen to these commentaries. I have nothing against Lewis Hamilton, the person. Lewis Hamilton seems like a very sound guy. He seems like a very mellow, very humble, good guy when he's on Twitter. He's always incredibly grateful. He seems like he's a religious guy. I'm not religious personally, but that's fine. He seems to be very grateful, very blessed towards God and all that, and that's cool. That's fine. I've got no problem with that at all. It's that I think a lot of his fans, and I think a lot of the British media, because, you know, when it comes to Formula 1 media, British journalism is the strongest on this one, probably followed by the Americans. But when it comes to British media, I think they seem to paint an unfair picture of how good Lewis Hamilton is. Hamilton, I think, was at his best the first 2 seasons he was in Formula 1, 2007, 2008. And I think that was the style of Formula 1 that suited a guy like Lewis Hamilton. Because Hamilton, I think, his greatest strengths is his ability to get raw speed out of a car. Hamilton's raw speed has always been freakish. Especially since he debuted. He was qualifying well. He's still, I think, the 4th or 5th best qualifier of all time. I think he's the 2nd best qualifier in the grid today, behind Sebastian Vettel, for sure. But in 2007, 2008, the style of Formula 1 where it was easier to pass, there was less of a dirty air effect, you know, it was a style that suited more aggression, especially because of the tyres we're on now as well, with Pirelli. Tyres that don't allow you to push 100% of a stint anymore. You know, tyres were much more durable back then. So, you know, Formula 1 back then suited a guy like Lewis Hamilton's style, who could just push like hell 100% of the time and be an aggressive passer. That worked. It was the perfect style for a guy like Lewis Hamilton to succeed, and it showed because he came second in his rookie year, and the second he won the World Championship by a point. You know, people say that Hamilton didn't deserve his world title. I think that's a bit untrue. To be honest, if he didn't win the one in 08, he probably deserved the one in 07. So I think, in my opinion, it kind of balances out. But anyway, as we've come into this new Pirelli era of Formula 1, Hamilton's style does not suit modern-day Formula 1 now. Well, I know it's modern-day, it wasn't that long ago, we were in 2007, but you get my point. It's much more about managing your car now, more than anything else. It's trying to find the mix between raw speed, as well as managing your tyres, managing your level of grip, you know, managing your fuel. It's one of those things where it's so much more important to be a race manager, rather than a pure, let's bosh out 20 qualifying laps in a row kind of driver like Schumacher was so good at back in the day. I remember when Schumacher was like, he was busting out 20 qualifying laps in a row, and he was unbeatable at that kind of in that kind of area. You know, put him in the cars now, and he wasn't as strong. I mean, maybe that's down to his age, of course. That's a factor, I'm sure of it. But the raw speed element of Hamilton has never really gone away. I mean, it showed last season when he was qualifying at a ridiculous level with a Mercedes car that was very strong and suited his raw speed kind of style. But we saw in moments like America last season where he was struggling to manage his tyres, manage his grip, you know, and manage his speed. And we all know if you gave Hamilton a car he could push in 100% of the time, I'm sure he would flourish. I'm sure he'd be right up there with Vettel and Alonso, in my opinion, the 2 best drivers in this sport. In my eyes, it's 1A and 1B. I know people like to think because I'm a Vettel fan, I'm biased, but I also can appreciate the supreme talent of Fernando Alonso. He is a top 15, top 10 driver of all time, Fernando, and I'm sure of it. But it's one of those situations where Hamilton has not adapted his style to suit how the cars are now, and that's not totally his fault. You know, sometimes you got to stick to what you're good at, you know, to be at your best all the time. But on the same tune, Vettel was able to adapt. He's been around since 2007 as well. Fernando Alonso's been around since way before then. I think it was 2001 Alonso debuted. And he's had to go through 3 or 4 major car changes in the sport since he's debuted. Other guys have been able to do that as well. Raikkonen took a 2-year hiatus and came back and was still kicking it. You know, I think it's that Hamilton's stubbornness to change that I think, in my opinion, is holding him back, because he has the speed to win a championship, and I'm dead certain of this. This is not an attack on Hamilton as people like to think it is. It's just saying that his current stance in Formula 1, in my opinion, is what's holding him back. And you've got to also consider other things like his showbiz lifestyle. I think Lewis Hamilton, more than any other driver in the field, likes to explore the other side, you know, the perks of being a Formula 1 driver, like a James Hunt, for example. You know, he has, you know, the high celebrity profile girlfriend in Nicole Scherzinger. You know, he's often seen taking pictures with all these rappers like Pharrell Williams, and, you know, he likes to make music on the side. He likes his sweets, you know. which isn't the healthiest thing to have if you're a Formula 1 driver. You know, it's one of those things where it looks like he's getting distracted. You know, he's taking big holidays instead of training and things like that, and it makes me wonder if he's fully committed. You know, it reminds me a lot of James Hunt, a guy that seemed to, you know, hold himself back by getting distracted in the other side of Formula 1. And it was James Hunt, it was more of the drinking, the tobacco smoking, and the women. I think in Hamilton's case, it's more about just loving the glitz and glamour lifestyle. Maybe that's a distraction. Maybe that's a factor people have to take into consideration. You know, maybe that is what's holding him back to a degree as well. You know, maybe he's not fully focused on his racing. Again, I'm only speculating here, but, you know, when you do these kind of things, you can do that. You have to consider, you know, this might be a factor, or this might be a factor. Maybe it's that. And I've got to give a shout out as well to I Am The Game on Twitter, Jamie Lee Myers, who quite rightly tweeted me, and I thought it was a great point where he said, I think that's why he's so harsh on himself, because he can't figure out what he has to do to put himself up there with them. And that's a great point. I mean, Hamilton has never been a very good media guy, especially later on in the line. I mean, often he's come across as quite whiny in his interviews, and he's said a fair few stupid things in interviews, like when he was said, you know, after, like, you know, Germany 2013, where he said, oh, it finally feels good to have a car equal to Vettel's, and then during the race he said the car was horrible and equal fuel on heavy fuel loads, and was criticising the team and throwing them under the bus like the next day. I know he was going for a breakup, so maybe he was emotionally distressed, but it's not the first time Hamilton's come off poorly in an interview. It's happened before with him. And you know what? I think during the second half of the year, he was very pessimistic, saying, you know, oh, you know, we've got to catch up to the Red Bulls. They look like they're going to be the fastest. We've got to try and work out and find a way to beat them. And, you know, he was often playing down his own team's chances, saying, oh, you know, we're not going to win races, and, you know, we're not going to challenge for the title this year, even though Mercedes did have a strong package last year. They had a race-winning package, and they came second in the Constructors' League. They beat the long-established Ferrari in only Mercedes, I think, 4th season in the sport properly with their current outfit. So it's one of those things where his pessimism is, you know, it makes sense. It ties together. It does make some sense there. So, you know, we can put this all together. And I know Martin Brundle came out and said recently that, you know, it'll be a travesty if Lewis only ends up with one world championship. I think a lot of his fans are so high and mighty on Hamilton's start because it's so reminiscent of Senna's, another guy who, as a driver, many people idolise and still do. It's like I know a couple of people pointed this out on my Senna and Rush episode, how the film Senna kind of re-established his kind of cult of personality. Sorry, CM Punk. His cult of personality kind of style where, you know, what he says, you know, he can't be criticised. He's above criticism because he's Senna. He's a racer. He's a driver. He's the kind of guy you want to be passionate and like. And, you know, I think that's a similar thing with Hamilton. You know, he's always loved Ayrton Senna. Senna was his guy growing up, and I think he's tried to mould a lot of his style on Ayrton Senna, and I think his fans have adopted him in a similar fashion. Like, whenever I've said Sebastian Vettel's in the same kind of league as Senna, like, some of the Senna fans out there will give me shit. Like, there's no possible way this could happen. Like, you know, it's absolutely wrong. It's dismissed. You can't say that. You know, and I think a lot of people have this kind of attitude about Lewis Hamilton. Don't get me wrong. Every driver fan base has their fanboys and fangirls like a Justin Bieber or One Direction. But I think that, twinned with the British media's very high focus on British drivers like a Jenson Button and especially a Lewis Hamilton, you know, it kind of paints this picture of someone who is kind of holier than thou in Formula 1 when in reality he's not the best. And I think it's very hard to form a reasoned debate as to why Hamilton is better than Vettel or Alonso. Even Raikkonen, I think, is in the same tier. And Raikkonen, like I said, took time off and came back and might just be as good. So all I'm saying is, if you're a Hamilton fan and you're really strong on him, take a look at what he's really done. Have a good long think, and maybe you'll realise that Hamilton isn't quite as amazing as I think some of the British media and I think some of his other fans like to make out that he is. Now, again, I'm not attacking Hamilton the person. Seems like a good guy, but he's always been back and forth when it comes to saying dumb things. And that twinned with, like I said, the media's perspective of him, can often paint him in a bad light. That's just the way I see it. And, you know, maybe Hamilton now is thinking, what has he got to do to win again? And, you know, that's almost sad in a way, because the guy is extremely talented. He's one of the most naturally gifted drivers I've seen enter Formula 1 in years. Maybe since Schumacher. But something's going on here. I mean, it's been now, what, 7 years since his last World Championship. That's a long time. Hamilton's 29 years old now. He's coming into his 8th season. The excuses are going to run out pretty soon as to why he's not up there at the top again. I'm just wondering, why is that happening? That's why this episode is called the Hamilton Conundrum. It's me trying to figure this out. It's a bit confusing. It's a little bit weird. Maybe you guys can help me out. Are you a Lewis Hamilton fan? Do you have a perspective on this? Am I talking out of my arsehole here? Am I completely crazy? I don't know. That's just the way I kind of see things. And I know some people will relate to me on this, and I know some others will criticize me for this because, you know, I can't attack Lewis Hamilton. But we'll see how this one goes down. I'd love to hear you guys' take as always. You guys' opinions are always so interesting to listen to, and I look forward to them greatly. So, in the meantime, I've been Harrison101. I hope you enjoyed this slightly controversial commentary. You know, and until then, I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Sayonara.